everybody. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's October 3rd, 2022 meeting. This evening's meeting is going to focus solely upon the deliverables that the building committee is going to present to us. This is a follow-up of our prior meeting. This meeting is being done remotely only, utilizing Zoom video conferencing technology. The instructions to join the meeting are on the agenda. We have a large crowd this evening. As I had mentioned earlier, John Jeffries, the third selectman, is at a meeting and he will be attending or tuning in this evening in about 5 minutes. But since we have a quorum, we're going to begin now. I'm going to take a roll call vote. So I am here. Robin Hunter, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, Bob Springett.
Present.
And John Jeffries will hopefully be joining us in 5 minutes. So before we begin this evening, I just want to go over how we as a board plan to conduct this evening's meeting. So as you all know, there was a meeting earlier in which the Board of Selectmen asked the building committee and the OPM to present two options to us. One, and they're not options, they're really two timelines. The first timeline is what are the tasks that need to get done to rebid the project as designed that was approved at town meeting. And secondly, what is the timeline to redesign a community center that will cost $18.7 million, which represents the proceeds that were raised and approved at town meeting with a bond that we've already borrowed. There was never, what I want to make clear is the Board of Selectmen wholeheartedly supports a community center. The town has overwhelmingly said they want a community center. What we are trying to do is not make this a divisive issue for Dover. This is a community center. It is a place that should bring our communities together. What we wanted to do is go to town meeting and present two options so that there wasn't an option of not voting for anything and reopening the question for a community center. So I want to make sure that everybody on this call understands that, because it's not clear to me based upon some of the calls I've received or emails I received that we have effectively communicated this. The last thing the Board of Selectmen want is to make this a divisive issue. We want to get to yes with the community. So this evening, the community center has worked with the OPM, and I believe the OPM, Phil Palumbo, is going to make a presentation. I would like to have Phil make the presentation first. Then I would like each member of the Board of Selectmen to provide their input on the presentation, and then we will open it up to community comments. We do not want to have repetitive comments. So if you have the same comment or support what somebody else said, could you please use that little emoji and raise your hand in support? And we will tally up how many people supported that, or use the clapping your hands emoji. I really would like us to conduct this meeting with civility and be as efficient as we possibly can, because after all, we all want the same thing, and that's a community center for the town. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Ford, I believe Phil is making the presentation.
Yes, Robin, this is Ford Spalding, Chair of the Community Center Building Committee. Robin, thank you. We agree wholeheartedly with everything you said. We are going to be bringing, for the two options that are being discussed, we're calling them options, the process, which you asked for, the timeline, and the cost for each. And please understand, we're not coming up with the cost of the building because we're unable to do that.
Well, that wasn't the deliverable for
That
it.
was not the
deliverable. Was timelines and
Correct.
tasks.
So it's process, timeline, and cost. And I've asked Phil Palumbo, who is representing and has been our OPM from Colliers International, to make that presentation. So thank you very much.
And just before we begin, John Jeffries, did you join the meeting?
I did. Robin, can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly. Can you just say you're present?
I'm present. Thank you.
And thank you so much for accommodating us, as we really appreciate it. It was important to all of us to get this meeting started as soon as possible. So thank you for accommodating our schedule this evening.
Okay, thank you, Ford. Thank you to the board, and thank you to everybody in attendance. I believe Caitlin O'Brien's going to share her screen that has the PowerPoint we put together. So we'll jump right into the agenda. So as Ford mentioned, agenda item 1, option 1, that would be the option to rebid the project as currently designed. So we'll get into the timeline and costs associated with that. Option 2, redesign the project to meet the current budget. And then through the analysis of those two options, a third option was kind of grew out of that analysis. It wasn't requested, but we thought there was information there that might be worth sharing. It's a redesign process, but it wouldn't meet the current budget, but it'd be a more efficient redesign process than what we'll step through in option 2. Item 5, going through the Pembroke Community Center project, the bids on that, and trying to understand apples to apples with our project. And then agenda item 5, go through the topic of design peer review and try to understand a scope of service for that, a fee and timeline for that, and then get into the discussion. So with option 1, the process would entail prepare the documentation. So drawings and specs are essentially prepared, but what we would do is just kind of clean them up. So any addendums issued this past bid process, clean up the drawings and specs and associate those changes into them, as well as do a last second code check to make sure we're still in compliance with all the applicable codes. And then jump right into contractor pre-qualification, solicit contractor bids, review the bids, present them to the building committee, and then ultimately present the GC award recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and then a special town meeting for any bid overage that might come out of that new bid. So the timeline associated with that, option 1, it's next slide, Caitlin. It's a total duration, additional time of 5 months. And we arbitrarily just chose November 1 as a start date just to pick one. But ultimately, November and December of this year would be that document cleanup, as well as the contractor pre-qual process. January and February of next year would be your kind of standard 2-month bid process. And then a March 2023 special town meeting for any bid overage that might come out of that. Construction and closeout, those are the same durations we've been showing. We've been showing a 14-month construction duration and then a 2-month closeout duration. So the project would close out in July of 2024. In terms of the additional costs associated with this option, additional soft costs totaling plus or minus $300K. They break down by OPM at approximately $110K. Designer approximately $175K, bid hosting approximately $10K, and then advertising approximately $2K. Again, we arbitrarily chose November 1 as a start date, and those costs don't include anything relative to any construction overage through the bid process or any needed additional contingency.
So Phil,
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. The designer, what would they be doing, and how many hours would you expect them to be working on this? When I think about going out to rebid, I understand that you're going to be incorporating some of the addendums into the body of the bid documents, but I guess I wasn't envisioning any time from a designer perspective.
Sure. So the designers are required to be part of the contractor pre-qual process, and they'll play a big role in the bid process and responding to any bidder questions that come out of that, as well as play a role in any special town meeting. So that 175K aligns with what their initial contractual fee was for the initial kind of pre-qual process, bid process, et cetera.
Okay.
Next slide, Caitlin. So option 2, that process would include reevaluating the building program with the owner, understanding that we would have to reduce the building size to get it to our current budget. So trying to understand what spaces are okay to be removed from the program, et cetera. Evaluate multiple design alternatives similar to what we did last year, and try to understand is this going to be a new construction scope or ad reno scope still, and ultimately through that process select a preferred option. Throughout that process, engage the community just like we did the first go round at it. The redesign would involve your typical 3 phases of design: schematic design, design development, and construction documents. Throughout that design process, just like we did before, we would have those 3 rounds of cost estimates and the value engineering associated with them, and then contractor pre-qualification, solicit bids, review them, present them to the building committee, and then ultimately to the Board of Selectmen. Next slide, Caitlin. And then, so for timeline and costs, we're showing a 12-month design duration. So that, again, arbitrarily choosing a November 1 start date. Caitlin, if you want to just hit the screen one more time. Yeah. There you go. Thank you. So arbitrarily choosing November 1, so 12 months would go through October of next year. The last 2 months of that 12-month design process would also be the pre-qual, contractor pre-qual process. And then November, December of next year would be your 2-month bid process. So then January of 2024 for a special town meeting for any bid overage. And again, construction and closeout durations, they were not altered, 14 months and then 2 months for closeout. So the project will close out in May of 2025. The additional soft costs associated with this option would total plus or minus $1.7 million. And they break down by OPM at $270K plus or minus, designer 1.4 million plus or minus, cost estimator at 30K, bid hosting at 10, and advertising at 2. And the lower part of the slide with the numbers is trying to understand, what would the reduced size building be? So taking that additional soft cost of $1.7 million out of our current construction budget, that leaves you with a $12.5 million construction budget. And then in the event the new program, the redesigned program, did not have a 3,500 square foot rec court in it, the new construction budget would be that $12.5 million minus $850K, because there was a separate appropriation to have the rec court go from 2,500 square feet to 3,500. So then the next step below that is trying to understand that reduction in size. So taking our bids on June 1st, we came in at right around $830 a square foot, escalating that cost per square foot out to the new bid timeframe of December of next year, taking that cost per square foot of $920 and then dividing that into those 2 new construction budgets, the 12.5 million or the 11.65 million. So a building that would have a 3,500 square foot rec court, that building would be 13,600 square feet, approximately 6,400 square feet under what we currently have. And then in the event the rec court got smaller than 3,500 square feet, the total building size would be 12,660 square feet, approximately 7,340 square feet below what we currently have. And that the idea with all this is to fit within that current budget of 18.85 million. Next slide, Caitlin. One more click, thank you. And then, so this option 3, understanding that, another 12 months of design for option 2 seems like a lot. Is there a quicker way or more efficient way to do a redesign? And so this is kind of how we thought of option 3. So the idea would be utilizing the current building program minus the rec court, community room, kitchen and cafe in order to expedite the redesign process. Again, same thing, 3 phases of design. We would go through the 3 phases of design just like we had before, but a more kind of quicker and efficient time frame. Continue to utilize those 3 rounds of cost estimates, value engineering, contractor pre-qual, solicit bids, review bids, present them to the building committee and ultimately to the Board of Selectmen. Next slide, Caitlin. One more click. And then, so the timeline associated with this, we laid out the timing such that this option 3, in the event it went that way, it would start April 1 of 2023, thinking that potentially option 1 is the first step, and then if that didn't play out, we would jump into option 3. So we're showing April 1 as a start date, and we're showing 6 months of a redesign process. So April through September of next year. The last 2 months of that 6-month process would be the contracted pre-qual. October, November of next year would be the 2-month bid process. And then December 2023 for the special town meeting. And then your 14-month construction and 2-month closeout. So project would close out April of 2025. So again, utilizing option 1 happening first, we're showing that $300K additional soft costs going through the option 1 process. And then the option 3 additional soft costs for the 6 months of redesign, 2 months of bidding, and then the special town meeting. Approximately $1.5 million for those 2 additional soft cost adds. The breakdown for option 3 consists of the OPM at $160K plus or minus, designer $1 million plus or minus, cost estimator $30K, bid hosting $10K, and advertising at $2K. So removing that $1.5 million additional soft costs out of our current construction budget, you got your $12.7 million, and then removing that $850K recreation core appropriation, you got a new construction budget of $11,850,000. Next slide, Caitlin. One more click. And then on this slide, we just wanted to show one graphically, kind of just hatching out the spaces. I think you all know the spaces, but and then the lower part of the slide kind of showing square footage wise and cost per square foot wise, how it breaks down. So removing the community room, kitchen and cafe, a reduction of approximately 2,535 square feet, and utilizing a $550 a square foot. You wouldn't use the full $830 a square foot because there's not all the systems, et cetera, and program are associated with those 2 isolated spaces. So you would lower the value of those spaces to that rate, if you will. So the reduction of those spaces result in a reduction of approximately $1.4 million. And then the removal of the rec court at that 3,500 square feet at $450 a square foot, again, because there's a little bit lesser systems in there, et cetera. A reduction of approximately $1.46 million. So a total square foot reduction of approximately 6,055 gross square feet. In dollar amount wise, approximately $2.86 million. So removing that $2.86 million from our June 1st bid gets us right around approximately $14 million at bid time. And then again, escalating that out to a new bid time of November of next year, looking at approximately $15.5 million. And the target was that new $11.85 million construction budget. So this option 3, although it's a redesign, again, it wouldn't meet the current budget. It would still result in an overage. And that overage, including the additional amount we would want to add to contingency because of that overage, would be approximately $3.8 million. Next slide, Caitlin. One more click. Thank you. And so on this slide, this is an added slide from what was sent out. We just wanted to show the 3 options all on one slide and just kind of quickly sum them up. So option 1 is that pre-qual, rebid with the current bid docs, additional time, 5 months. additional soft costs, plus or minus $300K. Option 2, redesign the current budget, additional time, 15 months, so 12 months of design, 2 months of bid, 1 month for the special town meeting. Additional soft costs, approximately $1.7 million. And then obviously what's affected with that is reducing the size of the building. So going down to a 13,600 square foot building in the event we're able to maintain a 3,500 square foot rec court, or going down to 12,660 square feet. And then this option 3, again, a redesign effort, but quicker than option 2. But that would result in, the additional soft cost of $1.5 million and an estimated additional overage at bid time, if you will, of $3.8 million. And again, that would include removing the rec court, community room, kitchen, and cafe. Next slide, Caitlin. And then on this slide, we wanted to step through the Pembroke Community Center analysis. So Collier's coordinated with the second low GC bidder on this project, the Pembroke project. They happen to also be the low GC bidder on ours that we were recommending to approval to the board. We downloaded the bid docs of the Pembroke project, downloaded the general contractor bid tabulations, as well as the filed sub tabulations, and kind of studied their project with ours, and that's how we developed this content. So I'll just kind of step through it as big picture as I can. So bid timeline, we bid, our GC bids was on June 1st. Pembroke bid out on August 31st, so a 3-month gap there. Our GC bid amount, the GC that we were going to award to, was $16,887,700. Roughly, we're at 20,335 gross square feet, so that comes out to approximately $830 a square foot. Pembroke on August 31st bid at $17,977,000. Their building size is 27,835 square feet, so roughly $646 a square foot. Project scopes were, an ad reno scope, so maintaining the existing 1910 building and adding to it. Pembroke was a new construction ground up, so they were totally abating and demoing the existing 45,000 square foot building and going ground up with their new building. Bidder coverage wise, we had 3 GC bidders, they had 2. We had 14 filed sub-trade categories, they had 13. We averaged roughly 3.7 per trade category. They averaged 3 bidders per, so plus or minus on top of each other. Filed sub-bid results, this is where we started to see the money delta between the 2 projects. So for our project, the filed sub-bid results, the grand tally amongst those 14 filed sub-trades was $7,512,275, so roughly $369 a square foot. On Pembroke's project, their grand tally for filed sub-bidding for their 13 trade categories was $5,257,229, so roughly $189 a square foot. So in studying those filed sub-trades and speaking with one of the GC bidders on that project, we came up with the list that's on the slide now, as well as there were some other deltas that came out of studying the filed sub-bid results. And I'll just step through the ones on the slide. So exterior cladding of the building, so the exterior siding, we went with brick. They chose to go with hardy board, a kind of high-end residential siding, if you will. So, going with brick is plus or minus 140% increase. So if you were to, on Pembroke's project, credit out their hardy board and go with brick veneer, you would be looking at plus or minus a $430K add. That's utilizing the cost per square foot received on our project. For roofing scope of work, our project consisted of 40% membrane in terms of the total roofing scope. On their project, they only had 9% membrane. The rest was asphalt shingles. So the roofing membrane system is more expensive than the asphalt shingle roofing system. So because of that, our roofing scope came in higher than theirs. So plus or minus, you're looking at an 80% increase going from an asphalt shingle style roof to that membrane system that has the rigid insulation, protection board, and rubber membrane. So if their scope of roofing scope was more similar to ours, you're looking at an add to their project of roughly $710K. Windows, we went with metal windows. They chose to go with fiberglass, so a more affordable window type. plus or minus 80% add. So again, you'd be adding approximately 230K to their project in the event they went with metal windows. And then fire protection, this is the big one. So, we had a fire pump system because the lack of water pressure coming out of the street. They didn't have that. They had a traditional fire suppression system. They had enough pressure coming out of the street. So they didn't have 2 underground water tanks. They didn't have those underground water tanks piped over to a fire pump system within the building and all that. That dollar-wise, that came up to a 550% add to our project. So you would be adding.
Do we have a design fire protection system that we were able to get that cost for? Because if I'm doing the math right, that's like $88 a square foot. That sounds really high. I'm just wondering, what's the basis for that 1.6 million? Because
So that's the delta.
Fire suppression system, just a holding tank of sorts.
So if you were to take, so our fire suppression scope bid out at a certain dollar amount. So the sprinkler filed sub bidding. And if you take that dollar amount, the low bid on that trade, and you divide our building size into, or you take that dollar amount and divide it into our building size, you get a certain cost per square foot. If you take that cost, so I tried to keep this analysis as simple as possible. If you take that cost per square foot, associated with a project that has a fire pump system, and you apply it to Pembroke's project, you're looking at an add of $1.6 million based off of their building size. That's how these ads were put together. HVAC system wise, so both projects went with essentially an all electric system. The one we went with is slightly more expensive. We went with an ERV/VRF system. They went with a heat pump system. If they were to go with that ERV system, approximately $680K add to that scope. And then kitchen equipment, they chose as a bid strategy to make the furnishing and installing of the kitchen equipment an add alternate. It wasn't part of the GC bid, that 17,977,000 GC bid. So that add alternate dollar amount came into $190K. So adding that to the GC scope to make these kind of apples to apples. So taking those scopes, as well as, so our electrical trade bid out roughly $15 per square foot greater than theirs. And that's partly due to that HVAC system. Our ceiling bid out, I want to say $10 a square foot, a little bit more expensive. And then we had metal ceiling systems at the canopies. So taking what's on the slide now and a few other trades, trying to make the projects apples to apples. So you first take our project, we bid 3 months earlier. So you would escalate out to us to their bid time. So by 3 months, plus or minus $340K, adding to our GC bid amount. And then taking all these different scopes that we just went through and kind of adding them to Pembroke's project, or, crediting out what they value engineered and putting these scopes into them. You're looking at us at $17,225,454, and then their project plus or minus $22,690,678. So our project grows to plus or minus $847 a square foot, and then their project at $815 a square foot. Still a delta there, but we would contribute that to kind of a bidding environment and potentially bidders feeling more comfortable with honoring their numbers, maybe not padding their numbers as much as they did on our jobs. Maybe there was more appeal on their project, et cetera, et cetera. But we feel like through studying the Pembroke project, we don't think there were any abnormal scopes or design features or design strategies taken on our project that put us in a bad predicament and so on and so on. It just, we went through the same value engineering conversations Pembroke did, and ultimately they chose some value engineering scopes we didn't, and that was the result. The roofing scope, I'll say, they went with ground up, so they were able to design a building design that very naturally had gable roofs or hip roofs, whereas we we had an existing building that had a hip roof, but then we had an addition to it, and the majority of the addition just naturally laid out to be a flat roof. And then the community section had that hip roof. So next slide, Caitlin. And then on this slide, just showing a rendering of both projects. So Pembroke at the top, and then us at the bottom of the slide. Next slide, Caitlin. So Collier's coordinated with a firm, BH+A. It's an architectural firm out of Boston. They are also the firm that was the designer, or is the designer on the Pembroke Community Center project. We reached out to them to go through this understanding and exercise to understand what a scope of service would look like for a potential design peer review of our project. So through back and forth with them, the scope of service would look like review a cost estimate and architectural basis of design, review the results of the visioning sessions and building programming sessions, review the activity schedule and room utilization schedule based on the design program, review the town's anticipated staffing and operational plan, review anticipated occupancy levels for spaces and floors, review building and site layouts, parking analysis, specify building materials and all the systems designs, civil, structural, MEP, etc. And then ultimately compile a report with any findings or recommendations. The fee would be a not to exceed $7,500. And then the duration of time it would take would be roughly a month, 3 to 4 weeks from a notice to proceed. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Yep.
You know, I'll just give you my 2 cents, and then I'll let both Bob and John give theirs, and then I can open it up to community discussion. And following that, you know, we will decide on next steps and vote on those so that we all understand, you know, what the next set of deliverables are. So, you know, certainly it's very disappointing that, you know, the design that was laid out, you know, the way to engineer or value engineer was solely focused on reducing the size of the building and specifically taking out areas that, as we all know, were really important to this community, such as the gym and the kitchen, because after all, those are the heart of the community center. So, you know, as I listened to the cost analysis between us and Pembroke, you know, it occurred to me, and I'm not an architect or a designer, as I mentioned, I am just a finance person. You know, it occurred to me that certainly, and you pointed this out, Phil, that some of our design choices, or many of our design choices, contributed to some of the increases in square footage or cost per square footage when you compare Dover to Pembroke, you know, such as a brick building certainly added to the cost. The design of the roof, which requires rubber membrane on the flat part of the roof, which is connecting the 2 buildings to one another. So, you know, the option 3 that you presented, I commend the committee for thinking about how to maybe reduce these timelines, because after all, as I mentioned to you when we reviewed the presentation, you know, my thought was, well, why can't we bring both of these options or have a timeline that would bring both of these options to town meeting sometime in the late spring? But, you know, based upon your analysis and the work of the committee, you're saying that that isn't something that is doable. You know, in my opinion, what is not doable is presenting a community center to the town of Dover that does not have a gym or a kitchen. Those are the 2 things that are the heart of this community. But the reason we as a board asked for these two options is there's no guarantee that the community is going to vote for the overruns associated with the design of the current community center, which is exactly why when I asked, or we as a committee asked for these deliverables, we said we are going to need to think outside of the box. And what that means is we can't, you know, I want to do a $1 million renovation to my house, but I can't afford it. So what do? So in this case, you know, I'm looking at this building and I'm saying, well, we can't have a brick building. I know the community asked for or gave an example of the library, but I think what the community of Dover really wants is a timeless building. And there are certainly many timeless buildings with clapboard or hardy board exteriors. You know, so I think what we need to do is recognize that we need to be able to deliver a building with these two key criteria that our community wanted. And we need to think differently about finishes and designs. Yes, the community selected a renovation, but we may not be able to afford that. So when we go back and redesign the building, you know, I did not envision having to go through the entire design process again. And I think that's what's driving the 12 months. We have a lot of information there, and we just cannot give the community everything that they wanted. But in my mind, the most important thing is the size so that we can offer the programs that are important to this community, both old and young. So I would say that we need to take the information that we have and redesign a building, a timeless building that doesn't have all the finishes that are in the current building. And perhaps then we could come up or have a building that costs 18.7 million, or perhaps the overruns are less and therefore more palatable to this community. So as a selectman and as a leader of this community, I need to figure out how to cut the design process, the timelines, with the goal of getting to town meeting late spring next year or very early in the summer. And, you know, we are not going to be able to give the community the community center they voted on. But I believe there's a way to give them most of the components to do that. And those are my comments. Bob? Bob, you're on mute.
And it was such a clever opening. Let me tell you, I had a whole shtick to do.
Well, you can do it again, but I'm
not, no, you missed it. I'm sorry. I started off by thanking the people who participated in putting together this presentation. I'm not sure who all participated, but I appreciate the effort, appreciate the outcome. I cannot believe that Phil can speak as quickly as he can, for as long as he can, and then expect anybody in the audience to actually be able to figure out what the heck he's saying. I think that was by design. I'm not sure. So let me see if I can echo articulate some of my comments. I mean, I think the option one, prequel, rebid, we've gone over that 2 or 3 times already. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's formulaic. It's roughly a 5-month process. You've already gone through it once. Enough said, right? the other thing that I thought, I'm just going to skip around a little bit because I'm scatterbrained. I actually was very interested in the Pembroke Community Center analysis. I thought that having that data, not necessarily in that format, more like data that people could actually understand. I thought that format, that data is quite revealing. And I think Robin summed it up very well. So, I mean, there are differences that our building committee made in materials, I guess is the right word, that resulted in higher costs. They're the big, we all sort of knew, I think Ford has been spouting this for probably most of his career, that the lack of water in the center of town causes us to have extra costs built in for water, for fire suppression, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't see that as that wasn't necessarily something we all knew about. Choice of heating systems. I mean, we had our building committee is made up of a series of pretty accomplished professionals. So I'm not one of those accomplished professionals. So understanding, though, that those are the differences that resulted in higher costs for the town, I think is a good thing to have. And it's certainly something that residents of the town can debate and vote on when the time is appropriate. So I thought that was quite good. I also like the Pembroke Community Center picture, by the way. And the contrast is sort of interesting. I really loved the brick. Still love the brick that we did. I like the renovation side of it. I thought that all worked well. But I'd have to say, from the Pembroke thing is appealing. Option 3, I think, is a non-starter for most of the reasons that Robin laid out. We can't have a community. We can't have a building that doesn't fit the basic definition of a community center. And I could ask Ford to recite the 4 to 7 functional rooms and this, that, and the other thing in a large meeting room that most community centers have as sort of the baseline. And I think that we worked very hard to make sure that in the design that we laid out, that there was things like adequate space for recreation. The town voted in 2021 for 3,500 square foot recreation space. I think that to me, one of the most important things, and Deborah, don't smile on this one, but I think having the community room and having that as the heart of the community center is absolutely critical to what I envision a Dover Community Center looking like. So now we come back to option 2, and I guess again I sort of I've been thinking about this much as what information does the Board of Selectmen feel is their obligation to present to the town at a town meeting so that the town can be fully informed and have all the information it needs with the options that we select, the options that we present to make an informed, knowledgeable decision about how they want their money spent. So when I was thinking about option 2, and I think we tried to capture that in the statement of work that we sent to you guys. When I thought about option 2, and I'm going to ask Deb to speak to this. So Deb, you better come off mute. Way back when in December of 2020, Deb put together 3 schematics, put together a schematic of a 13,000 square foot building. Probably John did the work, right, Deb? You didn't do the work?
I was in the middle of it all.
She a 13,000 square foot building, a 15,000 square foot building, and an 18,000 square foot building. And each of those buildings met the program requirements of the town. I think that's true. Is that right, Deb? You're muted.
to greater or lesser extent. You know, you start to reduce the size of some of the spaces and they can't host as many of the activities as we wanted to. So there was sort of like a sweet spot, you know, between size of building and the fact that it could be divided in half, for instance, like the recreation center, and then accommodate, you know, 2 programs at once. So we, you know, the design really focused a lot on maximizing the activities that could happen in the building. And I think that's how the final area, you know, that's part of what drove the final area.
Okay, and so I came at this, and the one that came to mind was, if, and again, I felt that if we had something that fit the budget of roughly $19 million, it seemed to me the 15,000 square foot building could be a base. I would include the extra space that the town voted for recreation. And I didn't, and I thought that that could easily be, and as a professional in my professional career, if anybody said, take on this project because it's dead easy, I ran away. But I thought that might be a way of getting to an option 2 in a relatively quick way that we could present to the town as an option to the building that people saw and voted on in 2021. Is that not possible? Because we did a lot. It's sort of the same work, right? A lot of the work's been done.
Deborah, I'll jump in, Deborah, and then if you want to add to it. So just to kind of somewhat step back, I'll answer your question, Bob, but then I just want to, so we started a feasibility study process. So we went through designer selection, we hired FMA, and we started a feasibility study process. I want to say it started in October of 2020. From October to 2020 to call it May of 2021, so what is that, plus or minus 8 months, we went through a feasibility study and a light schematic design, because we required the design team to bring 2 designs into schematic design. That's not common. An ad reno and then a ground up. So just, you know, step back and get that. So we spent 8 months to get to that level of special town meeting deliverables, a couple pretty renderings and some real rough floor plans. Now to get, so before the June town meeting of 2021, it was probably, I want to say January of 2021, maybe February, is when we ultimately said, all right, this is the vote. We're going to go with this ad reno scheme to develop through schematic design. We're going to go with this ground up. All the other schemes produced to that point were bubble diagrams. So like when we were developing this option 2, you know, it was our understanding to essentially say, okay, we did a bunch of feasibility study work, a bunch of visioning and programming to understand needs for spaces and space sizes, et cetera. But people want to understand what it's going to take to essentially go back to those studies, utilize them, but go from bubble diagram through up to bid. And that's just all day long. That's 12 months. I mean, the truth is we went from feasibility study and then our SD through June 1st. That was probably, that was actually 15 months. So 12 months actually cuts off a few months. So that was the rhyme and reason behind showing a duration for option 2 that might have not been the duration that folks were expecting to see. Is our mindset was, we're going back to these bubble diagrams. Bubble diagrams are only worth, you know, space sizes and general adjacencies. And we're studying them with people, whether it's just the board, whether it's the board and the building committee, the building committee and the community, whatever it might be. But the thought was reducing down by that amount. I mean, who knows what that means in terms of, is it still an ad reno? Does it now make sense to tear everything down and just do ground up at 13,000 square feet or whatever? So that was kind of the unknowns that we were struggling with when putting together the duration for option 2. That just, it seemed like we got to take a 12-month duration to square that out. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Phil. But then I'm looking for creative ways to be able to present something to the town that is a viable community center for a price tag of roughly $19 million. because to me, it's just, I mean, if I'm sitting in the audience as a resident and I'm being asked to do X, Y, or Z, these are questions that are going to come up. And I think we as a Board of Selectmen need to have a responsive, thoughtful reply. And I don't know how to get there. I know how we got there in 2018, 2019.
Yep.
And maybe it is sort of much more of a high level estimate, but I take your point that to go from bubble diagrams to, something that you can actually bid on, it's a 12-month process, right?
Yeah, that's how we understood option 2, but it must have been a misunderstanding. So I, Colliers and Deborah FMA, we agree with you in that there's definitely a difference from, kind of bubble diagram to just get to that, light schematic design level to produce deliverables for a town meeting. Yes, that's different. And, a typical duration for that. And, let's talk about this project where we've already done a bunch of work. I like to think, so we're showing option 1, bringing us into a March town meeting. Say option 2 was chosen and we started November 1. Yeah, I like to think, I mean, the process would have to go efficiently, but I like to think by a March town meeting, we would have deliverables up to a level that people could understand building size, understand building layout, site layout, and general exterior perspectives to understand what the design would be.
Right, and I don't like the word option, because I think when you use the word option, then people think it's one or the other. And at town meeting, that is what people will vote on. But going into town meeting, it's more, here are your 2 choices.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly.
One, because I think the word option is being misinterpreted.
Sure, I couldn't agree more. So, we went into June 2021's town meeting. It was already kind of set in place that we were going to go to that town meeting with a ad reno and a ground up. Right. I couldn't agree more that, this go round, if this happens, through the new feasibility study effort, a single option is chosen to be advanced to that town meeting level, and that is what's presented, not 2 different scopes.
I'm not sure.
Meaning not showing an ad reno scope and then a ground up scope, not doing that.
Right. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I would say is people have been waiting for a very long time to have a resolution about this particular thing, and whether it's a May town meeting or a March town meeting, to me at this point is irrelevant. I would much rather get to a town meeting where I'm reasonably assured that we've done all the work that we can to make sure that the vote is yes. So if it takes a little extra, no more than the second quarter of next year, I would fully support that. So that's it from me. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Deb.
Yep.
John? John, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. It is a unbelievable disadvantage to be on a phone call when people are giving visual presentations.
Well, it was sent out earlier. I hope you looked at it.
I'm sorry.
Robin, 1 second, please. There was a chat box. Why can't we have a fall town meeting? We don't have the information to have a fall town meeting. In order to have a fall town meeting, we're going to have to go back out for construction to rebid the process so that we can come to the fall town meeting, or a spring town meeting with the information that we need for the town to vote. It's a 5-month process to get from where we are to get construction bids, to pick a construction firm, and then get ready for a town meeting. So the earliest we could do it, it's my understanding, if I'm wrong here, Phil, please smack me a couple times, is sort of in the March, April timeframe.
That is the earliest we can do it.
Yeah, yes.
John, we
Sorry,
know you're
John.
at a disadvantage. Do you have some comments?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah. As I was saying, it is a dramatic disadvantage to be on a phone call when people are giving visual presentations. I didn't have the ability to interrupt Phil like you did. I didn't have the ability to weigh in like Bob did. I couldn't rebut any of the conversations going back and forth. I think it is mind-bogglingly arrogant of the people who put this together to even think that it was going to be constructive when we rescheduled it 4 or 5 different times. So to begin with, it is very, very difficult to be able to weigh in on conversations that you can't take part in as everyone else is. So first of all, let me just say, Robin's use of the word disappointing doesn't begin to describe how disappointed I was to see that when we're thinking about maintaining functions and functions being our primary objective, function equals size. When I went back and watched Deb's presentation on YouTube today, and as Bob very articulately described, Deb's presentation focuses on function and size, and how size equals functionality for the gym, as Robin said, for the kitchen. So to say it's disappointing is only the beginning. To just focus on the reduction of the size of the building is removing functionality of the building. And as Bob said, it's a non-starter. So I'm again, just, it is incredibly frustrating, in mind alteringly so, to think that that's where the committee's focus is on, reducing size. Finally, let me just say that I agree with Bob regarding the comparison versus Pembroke, the cost of goods leading to the cost of the job, and the items of which were enumerated, again, in Pembroke versus the design functionality of what we're trying to do, were very clear, very helpful, gives our constituents an idea of exactly where these cost items are contained. And then the only thing I would add is, where are the cost reductions in capital costs that we have seen, economically speaking, the reduction since June of items like lumber, steel, things that have gone down? Where is that in the presentation?
Well, we didn't ask for that, John. What we asked for was just a timeline, and when we go out to bid, if those savings, we should, if they are still there in the marketplace, then we should see those reductions in rebidding, if they exist. You know, right now, all we asked the committee to do, they did. They delivered timelines for both options that we asked them to deliver timelines for so that we could plan to go to town meeting. So this was not a rebid or recosting of any of the designs. It was just timelines and what needed to get done to get us to town meeting.
Understood.
Well, thank you for your comments, John, and we appreciate your input. You seem to do pretty well without being able to see the presentation. So, Bob?
Yeah, sorry, there was one other thing I wanted to mention. I thought that Phil, I thought this reaching out for the due diligence piece,
Right.
but I think that, clearly that's something that we should just jump on, because again, it's another question. It's another piece of the pie that we should articulate, be prepared to talk to about in town meeting, because it shows thoroughness in the work of the committees in attacking this particular issue. So I thought that was also, I'm glad to hear that that got teed up. Thank you.
Well, we need to vote to approve that, but.
Yeah, I know.
That was item 4 on my agenda. So for item 3, what I wanted to do was to get some community feedback. So it may be very difficult, and I would like to do this as fairly as possible. So if you are going to repeat something that somebody already said, we are going to ask you not to continue. However, we do want to hear community comments. So if you would raise your hand, and I will I will call on you when, and it's just going to be by who I see on my screen. So my apologies. And Kate, please keep me honest here, okay? So I will start with Chris Boland, because he's the first person I see on my screen. And I ask that you keep your comments short, if at all possible.
Thanks, Robin. Chris Boland with the Park and Rec Commission. We do have a clear option here, and it is to rebid the existing design and go to a town meeting in March. And I want to give 3 reasons why I think that's the appropriate approach. First one is, that's what you said we would get to do at the town meeting a year ago when we approved the project. The question came up in the Q&A before the vote: what happens if the final bid is higher than what we're bidding for in this meeting? And the answer was given by the building committee, and the building committee works for the Board of Selectmen, was that there would be an override vote. That's what was given to everybody when they submitted their vote, and 300 people plus voted for this. So that's the deal on the table that I would ask you to consider honoring. The second thing is, we've already borrowed the money. The bond has been drawn. The interest clock is ticking. Everyone in your head, you don't need visual to see this, just picture the national debt clock on the billboard in Manhattan. That's our bond. It's accruing interest right now that we're paying. So that's going to keep burning until we get the building built. We've taken out the mortgage, and we don't have a house or a clear path to design and build our house. The third reason, I think, is from a Park and Rec perspective, and I think by extension COA, we were told that we would be out of our space for a year. And so we're out of our space right now. The Park and Rec office is a conference room in the town garage. And all of our programs are scattered about town, and people have been very cooperative in providing space for our programs. But a number of programs have been suspended because we just don't have the space for them. And now, because the selectmen did not go for an override vote this past summer, it's going to be 2 years at a minimum. Even if we go to a special town meeting in March, it's going to be 2 years outside of space with no community center. And all these other things that you call options, choices, whatever, are all 3 years, maybe more. And so you're suspending the opportunity for us to deliver the services that we provide to this community. And so I would ask you that you tonight vote to approve the building committee to rebid the existing design immediately, and that we moved, and you also schedule a town meeting for March, so that the citizens of this town, 300 plus of whom voted for the last design, they didn't vote for $18 million. They voted for a community center.
No, Chris,
they have a chance to rebid
a community center that cost $18.7 million. I certainly appreciate your comments, but I do not appreciate you pointing blame to the Board of Selectmen. This is a community project. To hold a town meeting in July when people are not in town did not seem like something that was a good idea. 300 people voted for this community center, and we wanted 300 people to understand that there was a cost overrun. We have to go back out to bid. The minimum amount of time that takes is 5 months. Our goal was to be able to present two choices to the town. What happens if the town does not, it's not a slam dunk that the town is going to approve a cost overrun. We need to say, if you don't approve that, you're going to get a building that looks like this. The option cannot be, as far as we're concerned, that you're not going to have a building. And if the override does not pass, you know, it's another 12 months. We are trying to be proactive so that if one fails, we have done our work on the second option. So I appreciate your comments. I understand that you're angry, but we are a community, and I do not want to make this a divisive issue within this community. Thank you. Kate, you're next.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you, Robin. I agree with you. And I think you said that very beautifully and clearly, and we are a community and we have to do this. And I also appreciate everyone's work. But I raised my hand to say that somebody turned off the chat bar, and you were getting a lot of feedback in there that you could maybe save some time on if you had the chat bar on.
Oh, because it's on my screen, but thank
you. When you scroll to the bottom here, it says chat disabled.
Oh, all right. I don't think I have the power to do that, but maybe Kate can help us, or Chris.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting us know. The next person is Kristen.
I think I concur with much of what Chris said. I'm also, Robin, I respectfully disagree with you that I don't think you can assume that this would not pass.
I'm not assuming that. We're not assuming.
But I think, well, I think waiting and spending $1 million to come up with another plan does not seem prudent to me. I really feel that there is probably a great deal of support to build what we voted for and to override it. And I think assuming that that's not going to pass, I'm not sure on what you're basing that assumption on, but speaking for my circle, I believe there are a number of people who would fully support an override, but we don't know until we come to town meeting.
Thank you, and that's 5 months away, as you saw from this presentation. Thank you for your comments. Terry?
Thank you very much, Robin. I appreciate the opportunity to make a comment. I guess I'd like to first make a comment as a member of the building committee, and then I'd like to just offer a view as a resident of Dover. I've been invested in this effort for, I counted it up now, just about 4 years. In fact, next week forward was when we first got involved in this. And after a lot of time and energy put in and invested by an awful lot of really talented people, I can say with every bit of insight I could possibly muster that to expect to be able to achieve a meaningfully lower cost while preserving the programming that has been designed in through significant amounts of community engagement and involvement is highly unlikely, and I think even irrational. I think we have a very difficult circumstance we've encountered as a community. I think we have a difficult set of choices to be made. And I hope we all go into that eyes wide open on the realities that we are dealing with, which the committee has presented and which have been discussed. As a resident, I think there's really 3 priorities in my mind. One is to do everything we possibly can to meet the community programming requirements as developed over multiple years with substantial community input and with an overwhelming majority of town support at the town meeting. I think the second priority is to do so at or as close to as possible the previously approved financial estimates. Here, I'd like to note that I think there's a really significant issue that has not been adequately addressed, in my opinion. That is that the financing costs, as I understand it, and I may be wrong, Chris Dwelly can correct me on this, but the financing costs that were realized with the bond were significantly lower than what was planned or anticipated. And that creates space to offset some potential cost overrun. And I think we need to acknowledge that and consider that in the debate and in the probabilities being assigned to whether or not the town would approve an overage, when in fact that overage is likely to be lower than otherwise discussed so far. Finally, I think the third priority is to ensure that the town gets the final say on any final variance on their costs. And when I say that, I mean very specifically their tax burden. We're debating the project cost, but ultimately the impact to residents, the impact that me and my family will feel is through our tax burden. And that takes into consideration those advantageous financing costs that were secured when the bond was taken. So I believe, consistent with what was commented on earlier by Chris Boland, I would strongly advocate that this be brought to town meeting as soon as possible. Option one, as was previously presented, so the town gets a chance to vote on that variance. And if at that point in time it does not pass, then so be it. We'll be back to another 12, 15, 18-month redesign within a different set of parameters, but we'll know that we've fully vetted this particular set of efforts that have unfolded over the last 2 or 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Dennis Jenkins?
Hi, Robin, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I just have a question. I've heard a couple of different options, bringing it to town meeting to just vote for an override now versus going through a longer process that you've described. Can you, and can the selectmen actually quantify that difference, both including the monthly bond cost, since drawing down that money, through the two options? Are we talking about difference of hundreds of thousands? I mean, we all know that you've essentially borrowed this money and we've committed to it. There's a cost. There's no risk-free option here. There's cost going one way, cost going another. Have you quantified those? Can you just tell us the cost difference to these different options?
So we've already borrowed the money, so we're already paying interest on the funds. If you recall at town meeting, what was presented was that borrowing this $18.7 million would be tax neutral to homeowners of Dover. But by tax neutral, what was meant was that the Chickering bonds were tapering off. So we were paying off Chickering, and so the community center would replace the reduction in property taxes that homeowners would get because we would keep our borrowing levels the same. And the other way we were able to make it tax neutral was the Board of Selectmen elected to, or voted to use $4 million of free cash, and that free cash was going to be used in the years where we had the Chickering debt plus this debt that we were adding on to the community center. Now, with respect to these overruns, the cost will be, based upon the bids that we got, more than the $18.7 million. Is that correct, Chris? And so that would impact taxpayers, whatever that overrun cost would be if we have to go out and borrow additional funds.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me still, but that wasn't really my question. You're talking about process here, right? You've got a process to look at these costs. I'm asking about the cost of the process itself. Where are you going to get the money to rebid it out? I mean, where are those dollars coming from? And
so
what's
it has
temporal cost?
Right. So that's going to come out of the proceeds because it's an allowable cost under those proceeds.
Is it though? I mean, doesn't Chapter 40 say it's got to be used for the exact purpose? I've never read that in the law that you could use proceeds for that reason. You got to use them for exactly what you issued them for.
So I may be wrong. Chris or Nina, could you answer that question?
Yeah, I'm happy to. The way that the language was crafted at the town meeting that appropriated the funds for the building project empowered the Board of Selectmen to use those funds to develop and build a community center. So interpreted liberally, any additional feasibility or processes that the board determines that is required to ultimately build a building would fall under those funds.
Thanks, Robin. That's all I had.
Okay. So I don't have any other questions, but I will read some of the comments that were on the chat.
Robin,
Yep.
I had my hand up.
Oh, I did not.
That's okay. I just put it up. I know there's so many screens to monitor.
Yeah, I just kept going back and
That's okay. That's okay. If it's my turn, I'll make a comment. If it's not, I'm happy to wait.
It is your turn.
Okay, so my name is Rochelle Nesrella. I live at 148 Walpole Street in Dover. I'm a little confused about where the line of powers of the Board of Selectmen are and where the line of powers of the town lie and the division there and who's responsible for what. So if Nina is town council and if she's on, I would love to hear from her about that question. And on the last point about financing, I just want to reiterate, the more we spend redesigning and designing, it's coming out of the construction cost of the total project cost of the building. So we're dipping into what we could be spending on materials and work. Secondly, or thirdly, I wonder what the impact of the tax burden would be if, for example, we had the 3 million overage that we had with the last round of bidding. I saw some analysis in the spring, which I understand may be moot now because there was a possibility of a grant, I think, that may be off the table. But what I recall was that the per household tax burden of the 3 million overage was around $10 a year increase. So if anyone knows that data, I think that's very relevant. At the end of the day, I am extremely in favor of getting to town meeting as soon as possible and hearing what the residents want. I personally strongly believe that the residents will approve a reasonable overage, which I think would include $3 million, to build the building that has already been designed. And I think the longer this takes, the more damage is being done to the fabric of the town. And I hope that we can halt that.
So Rochelle, sorry, this is Nina. I'll jump in with the first question.
Thanks.
I'm going to ask you a question in return, though, since the division of powers between the Board of Selectmen and town meeting as the legislative body is a huge topic. Are you talking about with respect to the building process itself?
I guess I'm talking about the decision of whether to put the question of an override to the town now. Or it shouldn't, I feel that it should be put to the town to decide.
But the town can't do it.
No, I understand. Once you do it, I know the bids have expired. So as soon as possible, which I believe is option one, I believe that option should be put before the town and for the citizens to vote on, especially given what was voted on at the last town meeting on this topic. And I couldn't find online exactly what the words of those articles were, but the town approved a project of $18.7 million, and that needs to be respected.
And that's what we're trying to do here. But Nina, could you go ahead and answer?
Sure. So with respect to the building project itself, the selectmen need money from town meeting. So town meeting is the appropriation body. They're the ones who control the purse for the select board. As far as the design and construction and timing, that all falls within the Board of Selectmen's jurisdiction.
Okay.
Now, if you're talking about when and where to hold a town meeting,
no,
again,
I'm
the
not
select.
I'm just asking the question of the overage, approval of the overage, and the amount, the increase over 18.7. Whose decision is that?
The town needs the approval from town meeting.
Okay, so
That's the appropriating
Okay.
body.
So in my opinion, and given what other folks have said on this call, and 100% of the people that I've talked to on this topic, people want to vote. They want to vote on this overage. I don't think they want a redesign or a smaller building or a building with less functionality. And I think that the question should go to the town first. If it fails, then there can be an adjustment, whether it's to the size of the building or to other functionality or to redesign. But it is my strong suggestion and recommendation and belief that this question of the additional funding should be decided by the town as soon as possible.
And that is exactly what we're trying to do here. And the Board of Selectmen have always said that it's going to the town. And we asked for the timelines so that we understood what that would take, how long it would take. You know, this today, or when we received the presentation, was the first time that we were made aware that these two options did not have the same timeline associated with them. But thank you very much for your comments. I will read the comments from the chat room. A couple of comments are about we don't need a brick building. Overwhelmingly, there were comments about needing a kitchen and a gym because those are the heart of a community center. Then there were some questions about, somebody asked, what can we get for $19 million? And that was exactly what we're trying to do with both of these options. There was a question regarding why we can't have a full town meeting, and I think that question's been answered. Somebody said they would rather wait for town meeting and do the hard work first. So in other words, present both options to the town. There were a couple of people that agreed with the comment that we should go to town meeting first and get see if we can get the override approved. There were 3 people that supported that. Somebody asked what the monthly interest rate is on the financing. There was another comment, go to town meeting now. Somebody asked if we can rebid the project. Perhaps project costs have gone down. A bunch of other people agreed with that. One person said we are wasting time and money. Then, Chris, there's a question, and maybe you could respond to Dennis Jenkins offline about providing him with another example of the interpretation for using the funds. But, you know, perhaps you could give him a call tomorrow morning.
Happy to.
Okay. Somebody else said, tear the building down, plow the field, plant grass. And then there was another support to go to town meeting for an override. And those were the gist of all the comments. And I see Sally Hellwig raised her hand.
Thank you, Robin. A lot of things to think about tonight. Awful lot of information in that presentation. And frankly, it was a lot to absorb. And I think it raised more questions than answers. I think that the idea, option 2, was a non-starter. I don't think it was, frankly, a full assessment of that option. And the thing that I'm left with that I've been concerned about and I've been aware of for a number of months is the contrast between the Pembroke Center and now that we've seen some of the details, but the fact that the Pembroke Center was designed in the same time frame, went out to bid within a very close period of time, and yet still was able to come in as a larger project at a much more reasonable cost per square foot. And I really think that deserves more investigation. And I think the idea of being able to go to that architect and have them take a look at our plan for $7,500 is well worth that exercise, because it was very evident that they used in many aspects more reasonable cost of materials, and the result was much more reasonable. And they still had a kitchen and a fitness center and a lot more than we are going to have if we stuck with the plan. And yet right now, if we do what it seems like a number of people want to do, and I understand the concern about having to rush forward and try to get this thing underway, but I think that right now, what we have on the table is going to cost us a whole lot more than what the town voted for a little over a year ago. And I think we can do better than that. I really do. I don't think reducing the size of the building is the answer. But I think maybe if we didn't do a renovation, but we just did a new build and we didn't do brick, which I don't think is the end of the world at all. I think it would be very attractive using something similar to what Pembroke used. I think it's worth going through that exercise. And I'm sorry it's going to take a little bit longer. I know people are getting anxious, but there's a reason why we're here right now today going over all of this. It's because we had a budget that was not anywhere near what was originally voted on. And at the rate we're going, it's going to be even higher. So let's get this right. We can do it right and we can make a difference. But everybody's just got to come together and realize that. That's my thinking. And I think the Board of Selectmen is doing a great job in trying to figure this out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Barry Goldman.
Yes, well said, Sally. And thank you for everybody's comments tonight. I'd like to say that I think there's another reasonable path, and taking Phil's main scope of work differences and incorporating some of those savings. Most of those are fairly low-hanging fruit and can be done fairly easily, excuse me, without a lot of design change. For example, changing to a brick veneer. If anybody's been in downtown Natick recently, the new buildings are primarily brick veneer, and I can't tell the difference. So it's very attractive. We could incorporate that with hardy board, and right off the top, there's $430,000 potential savings. Excuse me, maybe there's a way to design a flat roof, not using the most expensive rubber membrane, and we're talking of possibly another $700,000 there. Windows, again, another potential savings that would not affect the attractiveness of the building. The fire protection system is an astounding number, $1.6 million. And I had the opportunity to talk to a DCAM certified fire protection professional engineer. And he was surprised at that number and said there's many value engineering things that we could look at. And I don't know, we haven't examined the specifics on the design of the fire protection system. So perhaps there are very, very large savings that we could achieve there. On the HVA system, I'm very much in favor of the most efficient system, the VRF system. However, there could be ways to do a hybrid system. The VRF is perhaps the most sophisticated advanced system there is. We could back off that system and have slightly less efficient, but still highly efficient. And we should not forget that we're going from a heavy oil-based system to one of the most highly efficient systems. So we still have incredible cost savings using maybe a less efficient system. So we perhaps give up 2% of efficiency in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings. Also, the kitchen equipment, going to equipment in general, perhaps we could bid some of the equipment, like the standby energy system. We could bid that separately and take it out of the budget, out of this budget. Therefore, we save the markups that the subs put into it and the GC put into it. So there's that's $250,000 that we could take out of the budget and bid that in a separate project.
Would that still qualify for the $500,000 Green Community Grant?
Well, the VRF system, I think we could engineer a system that would give us the same efficiency, or close to the same efficiency. We've done this before. We did it on the protective service building. We re-engineered that, and we were able to still get the grant. So when we do a grant, we don't specify the exact engineering specifications of the system. What we do is we indicate savings. And so the idea is to have roughly equivalent savings so that we still preserve our $500,000 grant. And I think that's eminently possible. Caryl has been very successful in re-engineering the green community projects. So I have a lot of faith in being able to change that project and still keep the $500,000 grant. So to reiterate slightly what Sally said, I would like to see us take a little time and have some fresh eyes, look at the engineering. There is a dramatic difference between the Pembroke design and savings and ours. We are so much higher. I would think it would behoove us to have the Pembroke designers, and by the way, they also designed the project, the community center for Sudbury, and Sudbury had similar costs to Pembroke. So there's two projects that came in significantly under our project. So $7,500 in 1 month to have some fresh eyes and some fresh ideas, and maybe a little different design, and trying to preserve the existing project as much as possible and getting to yes as quickly as possible with a spring town meeting.
Thank you, Barry. Dick Malcolm, you've had your hand up for a while. Apologies.
Yes, thank you, Robin. I'm a member of the building committee, but my comments are made as a citizen of the town. We obviously, the budget and the program don't align, and one's going to have to give, either the program or the budget. Programming drives size of the building, and size will drive the cost of the building. We've been at this, pretty much studying this since 2006. And interestingly enough, the programming essentially hasn't changed. I would recommend that we, let's let the town decide at a March town meeting, what's going to drive this project, the programming or the cost. And let's not spend any more extra money than we need to excuse me, the design. And perhaps some of Barry's comments can be rolled into the new bid documents. Thank you.
Thank you. So those are all the comments. I appreciate everybody's comments this evening. I also appreciate all the work that the building committee has done, as well as the work done by our OPM and the designers. So thank you all. With respect to the Board of Selectmen, I would like to make a suggestion and get your comments on that. I too would like to get to town meeting by the late spring. I feel as though it is really important for us to have a special town meeting, that this topic should not be discussed at our May town meeting. So I would suggest that we try and have a meeting either in April or June. I think we clearly need to move forward with rebidding of the documents, and we know that that takes 5 months. I also think that we need to immediately, effective tomorrow, go ahead and hire the other firm to do that study for us for $7,500, see what ideas they may have to help reduce the costs. I do not think we should reduce the size of the building in order to get an $18.7 million budget. Perhaps we cannot build a community center for $18.7 million, but I do strongly believe that we owe it to the community to at least look at some of these alternatives that we came up with tonight to close the gap between Dover's cost square foot of $1,268 compared to that of Pembroke of $820 and Sudbury within the same ballpark. It's just, we need to answer those questions and at a minimum do schematics of what the current design might look like with hardy board, a brick veneer, different windows, and maybe some other ideas that this architectural firm would have. So this evening, I would like to vote on 2 things. 1, move forward with that study, and 2, to work with the town clerk to put a meeting on the books, a special town meeting for the spring or early summer, and we can discuss that with her and make a decision at our next meeting. And at that meeting, if we can't present a building for 18.7, at least present an option whereby we have reduced the overage and let the town decide.
So Robin, what, you want to make a motion?
Yes, so I'll make 2 motions.
But do the peer review one, and then let's talk a little bit about the town meeting one.
Okay, all right. So I would like to make a motion to authorize the town administrator to enter into a contract for a peer review of the current design of the building contract in the amount of $7,500 with the scope as described in the presentation made.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
Aye, Bob Springett.
Aye, John Jeffries.
Okay. And then my next proposal would be to begin to plan or pick a date for a town meeting, either before town meeting in May or after town meeting in May, so that a decision can be made regarding by the town as to how to move forward or which option they want to move forward for. And at that town meeting, what can be discussed or presented is the rebidding of the current design of the building, no changes made. We could also spend some time looking into how to reduce some of those cost overages. Hopefully we'll get some feedback from the peer review. We could also look at comparisons, and maybe even when we go out to bid, ask for a party board versus a brick. I don't know if that's doable, Deborah. You can tell me I'm absolutely crazy. You couldn't do that. But, because to me, what might be palatable to the town, and I'm just pulling a number out of thin air, is maybe not a $5 million overrun, but a $2 million overrun, which we may be able to do by changing some of the finishes or maybe doing some small tweaks to the current design so that you get the size we have with the features that are most important to this community, which is the gym space, the rec space, as well as a kitchen. That would be my proposal.
So Robin, do we actually need to vote on that, or just something we can do?
I don't know.
Chris?
So, you don't necessarily, you need to vote if you want to call an actual special town meeting. If you want to simply have a conversation about planning for a special town meeting, which would include the town clerk and then
the moderator.
Yeah.
Then you can just indicate to me this evening that you'd like that to be placed on an upcoming board agenda, and we'll work that in.
Is that okay? That makes sense to me, Robin. Does that do it that way?
Right. So we're not losing any ground. We'll have a conversation with the town moderator, with the clerk. We will set a meeting. In the meantime, we are moving forward with the peer review, which perhaps some design tweaks will come out of that. And the goal is to get to town meeting in the spring and let the town decide.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Well, thank you everybody for your time this evening. Please, we will post updates regularly. We will also provide updates at regular Board of Selectmen's meetings, should you choose to listen to those. And appreciate everybody's input. My parting words would say this community center needs to be the heart of the community. We need to all come together to get this built. This is something that's very important to the town of Dover, and we all need to work together to get there. We may have different opinions on how to get there, but we will get there. And one day there will be, in the near future, there will be a community center for all of us to enjoy. So thank you all very much. And I appreciate your comments and input this evening.
So we need a motion to dismiss.
Oh, I forgot about that. To adjourn.
To adjourn.
So I will
right,
make
yeah.
a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I, Robin Hunter.
But I have to second it first.
I'll second it. Well, see,
Second.
I want to go eat.
Second.
Or actually, somebody was drinking a glass of wine, and I thought that might be a good thing to do.
All right, so I second. So go ahead.
I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springett.
Hi, John Jeffries.
Thank you all very much. Great, appreciate all the input. And I also agree the civility of all the comments. That really is one of the essences of real community. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.